The night air was thick with an eerie stillness as I stumbled through the darkened streets of Denver. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a desperate reminder that I was still alive. For now. The events of the past few hours played on repeat in my mind, a horrifying loop I couldn't escape. It had all started as a typical night out with friends. We'd been bar hopping, celebrating my promotion at work. The neon lights of downtown Denver had beckoned us from one establishment to the next, our laughter echoing off the brick buildings that lined the streets. But as the night wore on, an unsettling feeling had begun to creep over me. It was as if something was watching us, stalking us from the shadows. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to one too many drinks. But then we heard it, a bone-chilling howl that cut through the night air like a knife. It wasn't the sound of a regular wolf or a dog. No, this was something different, something primal and terrifying. At first, we laughed it off. Probably just some drunk guy messing around, Mike had said, slapping me on the back. But the laughter died in our throats as we rounded the corner onto a deserted street. There, in the pale moonlight, stood a creature straight out of our worst nightmares. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with matted fur that seemed to absorb the darkness around it. But it was the eyes that froze me in place, glowing amber orbs filled with an intelligence and hunger that was unmistakably human. For a moment, time stood still. Then with a snarl that exposed rows of razor-sharp teeth, the beast lunged. I don't remember much of what happened next. There was screaming, the sound of tearing flesh, and the metallic scent of blood filling the air. I ran, driven by pure instinct, my feet pounding the pavement as I fled for my life. And now, here I was, alone in the dark streets of Denver, hunted by a creature I'd always believed was nothing more than a myth. My name is Henry, and this is my story of survival against the Werewolf of Denver. As I pressed my back against the cold brick wall of an alley, trying to catch my breath, I couldn't help but think about how ordinary this day had started. I'd woken up in my small apartment, gone to work at the tech startup where I'd just been promoted, and made plans to celebrate with friends. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that by night's end, I'd be running for my life from a werewolf. The sound of claws scraping against concrete snapped me back to the present. It was close, too close. I held my breath, praying that the darkness of the alley would conceal me. The scraping grew louder, accompanied by heavy, ragged breathing. I could smell it now, a pungent odor of wet fur and something metallic. Blood. Slowly, I turned my head to peer around the corner. What I saw made my blood run cold. The werewolf was there, its massive form silhouetted against the dim streetlights. It was sniffing the air, searching for me. I watched in horror as it turned its head, those terrifying amber eyes scanning the alley where I hid. For a moment, our eyes met. I felt like a rabbit caught in the gaze of a wolf, paralyzed by fear. Then, with a growl that seemed to shake the very ground, it charged. I ran like I'd never run before, my legs pumping furiously as I sprinted down the alley. I could hear it behind me, its heavy footfalls and snarling breath growing closer with each passing second. I darted around corners, vaulted over trash cans, and squeezed through narrow passages between buildings, desperate to lose my pursuer. As I emerged onto a wider street, I saw Salvation, a 24-hour diner, its neon sign a beacon of hope in the darkness. I burst through the doors, startling the few patrons inside. "Call the police!" I screamed, my voice hoarse with terror. "There's a monster out there!" The patrons looked at me like I was crazy, but the urgency in my voice must have convinced them. The waitress behind the counter reached for the phone, but before she could dial, an earth-shattering roar filled the air, followed by the sound of shattering glass. The werewolf had found me. Chaos erupted in the diner. People screamed and scrambled for cover as the massive beast crashed through the plate glass window. Tables were overturned, dishes smashed to the floor, and there I stood, frozen in terror, face to face with the creature that had been hunting me. Up close, it was even more terrifying. Its fur was matted with blood. The blood of my friends, I realized with a sickening lurch. Its claws, each as long as my hand, left deep gouges in the linoleum floor as it advanced. And those eyes, those horrible, intelligent eyes, were fixed on me, with a hunger that chilled me to my core. As it lunged, time seemed to slow down. I saw its powerful muscles bunch, its jaws open wide to reveal rows of gleaming teeth. In that moment, I was certain I was going to die. But some primal instinct for survival kicked in, and I dove to the side at the last second. The werewolf crashed into the counter where I had been standing, sending splinters of wood and shards of broken dishes flying. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the kitchen, hoping to find a weapon, anything to defend myself. I burst through the swinging doors, my eyes frantically scanning the room. There by the stove, a set of large kitchen knives. I grabbed the biggest one just as the werewolf smashed through the doors, sending them flying off their hinges. With nowhere left to run, I turned to face the beast. My hands shook as I held the knife out in front of me, knowing it was a pitiful defense against such a creature. But I was determined to go down fighting. The werewolf seemed to pause, as if surprised by my sudden show of defiance. It circled me slowly, its claws clicking on the tile floor. I kept the knife pointed at it, turning to keep it in my sight. For a moment, we were locked in a deadly dance, predator and prey, neither making the first move. Then, with a speed that defied its size, the werewolf attacked. I slashed wildly with the knife, feeling it connect with flesh. The beast roared in pain and fury, but my small victory was short-lived. With a swipe of its massive paw, it knocked the knife from my hand, sending it clattering across the floor. I was defenseless now, backed against the wall as the enraged werewolf advanced. I could see the cut I'd made across its chest, a thin line of red in its dark fur. But instead of slowing it down, the wound seemed to have only angered it further. As it reached for me, its claws glinting in the fluorescent kitchen lights, I closed my eyes and waited for the end. But instead of the searing pain I expected, I heard a loud crash followed by a yelp of pain. I opened my eyes to see the werewolf stumbling backward, shaking its head. The heavy cast iron skillet that had struck it clattered to the floor, and I looked up to see the diner's cook, a burly man with tattoos covering his arms, standing there with a look of shock on his face. "Run, kid!" he shouted, already reaching for another pan. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the back door, hearing the sounds of struggle behind me. As I burst out into the alley behind the diner, the cool night air hit my face, but I couldn't stop. I ran down the alley, my lungs burning, my legs aching, but driven by pure adrenaline. I had no idea where I was going, only that I needed to get as far away as possible. The streets of Denver, once so familiar, now seemed like a maze designed to trap me. Every shadow held potential danger. Every sound made me flinch. As I ran, I tried to make sense of what was happening. Werewolves weren't real. They couldn't be. And yet I had seen it with my own eyes, felt the heat of its breath, smelled the blood on its fur. How was this possible? And why was it hunting me? I found myself in a park, the trees casting long shadows in the moonlight. I stopped, bent over with my hands on my knees, gasping for breath. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my heart and my ragged breathing. Then a twig snapped. I whirled around, my eyes wide with fear. There at the edge of the trees, I saw it. The werewolf had found me again. But something was different this time. It wasn't charging, wasn't snarling. Instead, it stood there watching me with those intelligent eyes. Slowly, almost cautiously, it took a step forward. I tensed, ready to run again, but something made me hesitate. The werewolf's posture wasn't aggressive. It almost seemed curious. "What do you want?" I found myself asking, my voice barely above a whisper. To my shock, the werewolf's form began to change. Its fur seemed to recede, its shape becoming more human. Within moments where the beast had stood, there was now a man. He was naked, his body covered in scars, his long hair matted and wild. But his eyes, they were the same amber color as the werewolf's. "Henry," the man said, his voice rough as if unused to speaking. "I've been looking for you." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. How do you know my name? What are you?" The man, or werewolf, or whatever he was, took another step forward. "My name is Jack, and I'm like you, Henry. Or rather, you're like me." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my fear mixing with confusion. Jack's eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. "You're one of us, Henry. A werewolf. You just don't know it yet. I shook my head violently. No, that's impossible. I can't be. Think about it, Jack urged. The heightened senses you've been experiencing lately. The strange dreams. The way you always feel more alive during the full moon. It's all part of who you are. As much as I wanted to deny it, his words struck a chord. I had been feeling different lately, more alert, more in tune with my surroundings. And the dreams. Dreams of running through forests on all fours, of hunting under the moonlight. I had dismissed them as stress-induced nightmares, but now... But you killed my friends, I said, the horror of earlier events flooding back. Jack's face fell. I'm sorry about that. Truly I am. But we needed to awaken your true nature. Fear and adrenaline can trigger the first transformation. We had to push you to your limits. We? I asked, a chill running down my spine. As if on cue, more figures emerged from the shadows. Men and women, all with the same wild look as Jack, all with eyes that glowed in the darkness. Welcome to the pack, Henry, Jack said, extending his hand. It's time for you to embrace who you truly are. I stood there, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But another part, a part I hadn't even known existed until now, felt a pull toward these people, towards the promise of power, of belonging. As the full moon broke through the clouds, bathing the park in silver light, I felt a change come over me. My body began to shake, my bones shifting and reforming. First sprouted from my skin, my teeth elongated into fangs. The last thing I saw as a human was Jack's approving smile. Then the world shifted and I saw through new eyes, smelled through a keener nose, heard with sharper ears. I threw back my head and howled, the sound echoing through the night. The Werewolf of Denver was no longer hunting me. I had become the hunter. In the days that followed, I struggled to come to terms with my new reality. The pack, my pack now, I supposed, had taken me to their den in the mountains outside of Denver. It was a sprawling network of caves, hidden from the world and comfortable in a primal sort of way. Jack, who I learned was the alpha of our pack, took it upon himself to teach me about our kind. We're not monsters, Henry, he explained as we sat around a fire one night. We're just different. More in tune with our instincts, with nature itself. I listened, but I couldn't shake the memory of that first night. The terror, the blood, the lives lost. But you killed people, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My friends. Jack's eyes, always that unnerving amber color, seemed to soften. I won't lie to you, Henry. We're predators. It's in our nature to hunt. But we don't have to be mindless killers. With control, with practice, we can channel our instincts, use our abilities for good. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that I wasn't destined to become a murderer. But the guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the cost of my awakening. The others in the pack tried to help me adjust. There was Sarah, a lithe woman with a mane of red hair, who taught me how to control my transformations. It's all about focus, she said, demonstrating how she could partially shift, her hands becoming claws before returning to normal. Your body is yours to command, in any form. Then there was Marcus, a mountain of a man who had been a werewolf for over 50 years. He taught me about our enhanced senses, how to use them to track and hunt. But remember, he cautioned, his gruff voice serious, with great power comes great responsibility. We hunt to survive, not for sport. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself adapting to this new life. The raw power I felt when in wolf form was intoxicating. Running through the forest on all fours, the wind in my fur, the sense of the wild filling my nostrils. It was a freedom I'd never known before. But with that freedom came a constant battle for control. The wolf inside me was always there, always hungry. It took every ounce of willpower to keep it in check, to remember my humanity. One night, about a month after my transformation, Jack took me on a hunt. We ran through the mountains, our wolf forms silent shadows in the moonlight. As we crested a hill, I caught a scent on the wind. Deer. Jack looked at me, his wolf eyes gleaming. Without a word, we both understood. This was a test, a chance to prove that I could hunt without losing control. We stalked our prey silently, using every skill Marcus had taught me. As we closed in on the herd, I felt the familiar surge of the predator's instinct, the urge to chase, to bring down, to kill. But as I prepared to lunge, another scent caught my attention. It was faint, almost lost under the stronger smell of the deer, but it was unmistakably human. I hesitated, my wolf form trembling with the effort of restraint. Jack had already begun the chase, expecting me to follow. But I couldn't. The memory of that first night, of the lives lost, was too strong. I turned away from the deer, following the human scent instead. It led me to a small campsite where a family, a couple and their young daughter, were sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that had been so close. When Jack found me later, I was sitting in human form at the edge of the campsite, keeping watch. He shifted back as well, his expression unreadable. "You smelled them," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if something happened to them. Jack was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. "You passed the test, Henry. The real test." I looked at him confused. "But I didn't hunt. I didn't prove I could control myself while hunting." "No," Jack agreed. "You proved something far more important. You proved that you could choose not to hunt, that your humanity is stronger than your instincts." As we made our way back to the den, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since that fateful night in Denver, I felt hope. Hope that I could live with this new part of myself without losing who I was. But my journey was far from over. As we neared the den, a howl split the night, a howl of warning. Something was wrong. We raced back, shifting to our wolf forms for speed. As we approached, the scent of fear and anger filled the air, and underneath it all, a smell that made my hackles rise. Hunters. The scene that greeted us was chaos. Members of our pack were engaged in a fierce battle with a group of heavily armed men. Silver bullets whizzed through the air. They knew what they were hunting. Jack let out a roar that shook the trees, rallying the pack. I watched in awe as he charged into the fray, his massive wolf form a blur of fury and power. For a moment I hesitated. The human part of me wanted to run, to escape this madness. But I couldn't abandon my new family. With a howl of my own, I joined the battle. The fight was brutal and chaotic. My enhanced senses were overwhelmed by the sounds of gunfire, the smell of blood and gunpowder, the flashes of muzzle fire in the darkness. I dodged and weaved, my wolf instincts guiding my movements. I saw Sarah go down, a silver bullet grazing her flank. Without thinking, I leaped to her defense, my jaws closing around the arm of the hunter who had shot her. I tasted blood, heard the man's scream of pain and terror. And in that moment, with the taste of human blood on my tongue, I felt the wolf inside me surge forward. The predator, the killer, threatened to take control. But then I heard Jack's voice in my head, a trick he had been teaching me. "Remember who you are, Henry. You're more than just the wolf." With a tremendous effort of will, I released the hunter's arm. He scrambled away, clutching his bleeding limb, eyes wide with fear. The battle raged on around us. I saw Marcus take down 2 hunters with a series of lightning-fast strikes. Jack was a whirlwind of claws and fangs, seeming to be everywhere at once. But we were outnumbered, and the hunters were well prepared. For every one we took down, it seemed 2 more appeared, and their silver weapons were taking a toll. More and more of our pack were falling, their wounds smoking from the touch of silver. As I fought, a realization dawned on me. This wasn't just a random attack. The hunters were too well organized, too knowledgeable about our weaknesses. Someone had told them about us. But who? A scream of pain cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Jack, in human form, on his knees. A tall hunter stood over him, a silver blade pressed to his throat. "It's over, beast," the hunter snarled. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." Time seemed to slow down. I saw the blade begin to move, saw the look of defiance in Jack's eyes. In that moment, I made a choice. I let out a howl that seemed to shake the very mountains. Every eye turned to me, hunter and werewolf alike, and then I began to change. But this wasn't like any transformation I'd experienced before. I felt my wolf form grow, expand. My fur became thicker, my claws and fangs longer. I towered over everyone, a monstrous hybrid of man and wolf. With a roar that sent the hunters stumbling backward, I charged. My newfound strength sent hunters flying with each swipe of my massive paws. Their bullets seemed to bounce off my thick hide. The tide of the battle turned. Inspired by my transformation, the rest of the pack rallied. The hunters, faced with this new threat, began to retreat. As the last of them disappeared into the forest, I felt the change subside. I shrank back to my normal size, then shifted back to human form, collapsing to my knees in exhaustion. Jack was at my side in an instant, his eyes wide with awe. "Henry," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "do you have any idea what you just did?" I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "You achieved the alpha form," Jack explained. "It's a transformation that only the most powerful werewolves can achieve. And you did it to save me, to save all of us." As the rest of the pack gathered around, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and respect, I realized that everything had changed. Again. In the aftermath of the battle, as we tended to our wounded and mourned our fallen, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The hunters knew about us now. They would be back, and in greater numbers. Jack called a meeting of the entire pack. As we gathered in the main cave, I could feel the tension in the air. Fear, anger, uncertainty. It all swirled around us like a tangible force. "We've been discovered," Jack began, his voice grave. "The safety we've enjoyed in these mountains has been compromised. We need to decide our next move." Voices rose in a cacophony of suggestions and arguments. Some wanted to fight, to take the battle to the hunters before they could regroup. Others argued for fleeing, finding a new home far from here. As the debate raged, I found myself thinking about the life I'd left behind in Denver, the job I'd abandoned, the friends I'd lost. And I thought about the family I'd seen camping, blissfully unaware of the supernatural war that had nearly engulfed them. "We need to go public," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Every eye turned to me. Jack raised an eyebrow, silently urging me to continue. I took a deep breath. "Look, hiding clearly isn't working anymore. These hunters, whoever they are, they know about us. And they've decided we're a threat that needs to be eliminated. If we keep hiding, keep running, we're just confirming their fears." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, her arm still bandaged from the silver bullet wound. "I'm suggesting we reveal ourselves to the world," I said. "On our terms. We show them that we're not monsters, that we can control ourselves, that we're just people. Different, yes, but not evil." The cave erupted in shouts. Some were supportive, others outraged. Jack raised a hand, silencing everyone. "It's a bold plan," he said, his eyes locked on mine, "but it's also incredibly dangerous. If it goes wrong, we could be signing our own death warrants." I nodded. "I know, but think about it. Right now, all humans know about werewolves is what they've seen in movies or read in books. We're always the villains, the monsters that need to be slain. But we can change that narrative. We can show them the truth." Marcus, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "The boy has a point. I've lived through decades of hiding, of fear. Maybe it's time for a change." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the faces of the pack. Then he nodded. "All right, Henry, we'll do it your way. But we need a plan, a way to reveal ourselves that won't cause panic." And so, over the next few days, we formulated our plan. We would start small, reaching out to select journalists and scientists. We would offer proof of our existence, demonstrate our abilities, and most importantly, show that we could control our transformations. I would be our spokesperson. As the newest member of the pack, I could bridge the gap between the human world and our own. And my ability to achieve the alpha form, which I was now learning to control, would be our ace in the hole if things went wrong. The night before our planned revelation, I stood at the entrance of our den, looking out over the twinkling lights of Denver in the distance. Jack joined me, his presence a comforting warmth at my side. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "No," I admitted, "but it needs to be done." Jack nodded. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. It's time for us to step out of the shadows. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that the pack stands with you." As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, I steeled myself for what was to come. In a few hours, the world as we knew it would change forever. The werewolves of Denver were about to introduce themselves to the world. And I, Henry, once an ordinary guy just trying to make it in the big city, would be leading the charge. The future was uncertain, filled with both danger and hope. But one thing was clear. There was no going back. The howl of the werewolf, once confined to myth and shadow, was about to echo across the globe. As I prepared to face the cameras and the questions, to reveal our existence to a world that had long relegated us to the realm of fiction, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. From that terrifying night in the streets of Denver to this moment on the precipice of a new era, my life had been transformed in ways I could never have imagined. But as I looked around at my pack, at Jack, Sarah, Marcus, and all the others who had become my family, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. We were no longer just survivors hiding in the shadows. We were ambassadors of a hidden world, ready to step into the light. The sun rose over the Rocky Mountains, heralding the dawn of a new day, and with it, the dawn of a new chapter in human history. The werewolves were coming out of hiding, and the world would never be the same. As I took my first step towards the waiting press conference, I felt the wolf inside me, not as a separate entity to be feared and controlled, but as an integral part of who I was. I was Henry, the Werewolf of Denver, and I was ready to change the world.